October 15th, 1988, Dodger Stadium, Los Angeles, California. The Los Angeles Dodgers were down to their final out. Game 1 of the World Series was almost gone. The Oakland Athletics led 4-3 in the bottom of the ninth inning. Their closer, Dennis Eckersley, stood on the mound, one of the most dominant relief pitchers in baseball. The Dodgers were beaten up, outmatched, and running out of chances. And somewhere away from the field, Kirk Gibson could barely move. He was supposed to be the heart of the Dodgers lineup, their best power hitter, their emotional leader, the player who had helped drag Los Angeles through the regular season and into October. But now, on the biggest night of the year, he was not in the starting lineup. He had injuries in both legs. His left hamstring was damaged. His right knee was hurting. He had not taken batting practice. He had not joined pre-game ceremonies. Most people in the stadium did not expect him to play at all. The television cameras even searched the Dodgers' dugout and could not find him. To the crowd, Gibson was invisible. To the Athletics, he was unavailable. To the Dodgers, he was almost out of options. But in the bottom of the ninth, with 2 outs, 1 man on base and the World Series opener hanging by a thread, Gibson began making his way towards the dugout. He was not walking like a healthy athlete. He was limping. Every step looked difficult. The moment seemed impossible before he even picked up a bat. A hitter who could barely stand was about to face one of the best closers in baseball. The Dodgers were 1 strike away from losing. The Athletics were 1 pitch away from taking Game 1. And Kirk Gibson was about to create one of the most famous home runs in sports history. This is the story of the injured player who could barely walk. How Kirk Gibson limped into the 1988 World Series, why the Dodgers were never supposed to beat the Oakland Athletics, how 1 at-bat changed the entire feeling of the series, and why 1 swing in Los Angeles became a moment baseball fans have never forgotten. The story did not begin in the 9th inning. It began with a Dodgers team that spent all of 1988 being doubted. The Los Angeles Dodgers were not seen as a powerhouse. They were not built like the Oakland Athletics, who had superstar hitters, dominant pitching, and the look of a team ready to control the World Series. The Athletics had Jose Canseco and Mark McGwire, 2 of the most feared power hitters in baseball. They had won 104 games during the regular season. They looked strong, confident, and dangerous. The Dodgers were different. They won with pitching, defense, toughness, and just enough offense. They were managed by Tommy Lasorda, a loud, emotional, loyal manager who believed in his team even when the rest of baseball did not. The Dodgers had Oral Hershiser, who was in the middle of one of the greatest pitching runs ever. They had role players who knew their jobs. They had veterans, they had fight, and they had Kirk Gibson. Gibson had come to the Dodgers before the 1988 season after playing for the Detroit Tigers. He was not just brought in to hit home runs, he was brought in to change the team. The Dodgers needed an edge, and Gibson gave them one. He played hard. He demanded effort. He brought intensity to a clubhouse that needed a spark. He was not always easy. He could be serious, demanding, and blunt. But that was part of why he mattered. Gibson helped give the Dodgers a personality. He made them tougher. During the 1988 season, he hit 25 home runs, stole 31 bases, and became the National League Most Valuable Player. But numbers alone did not explain his impact. Gibson made the Dodgers believe they could be more than what people expected. Los Angeles won the National League West, then faced the New York Mets in the National League Championship Series. The Mets were supposed to beat them. New York had defeated the Dodgers again and again During the regular season, they had power, pitching, and a reputation as one of the best teams in baseball. Many people thought the Dodgers had little chance, but the Dodgers survived. The series went 7 games. It was physical, tense, and exhausting. Gibson was already hurting. He injured his legs during the playoffs, and by the time the Dodgers reached the World Series, his body was breaking down. The victory over the Mets got Los Angeles to the biggest stage, but it also left their best hitter barely able to move. That was the problem going into Game 1. The Dodgers had reached the World Series, but their MVP was badly injured, and waiting for them was Oakland. The Athletics were not just good, they looked like the future of baseball. Jose Canseco had just become the first player in Major League history to hit 40 home runs and steal 40 bases in the same season. Mark McGwire had enormous power. Dave Stewart was a tough ace. Dennis Eckersley had become one of the most feared closers in the game. Oakland was confident. Most experts picked them to win. The Dodgers were underdogs again. Game 1 was played at Dodger Stadium on October 15th, 1988. The crowd was loud, hopeful, and nervous. Los Angeles needed a strong start to the series, especially because nobody knew how much Gibson could give them. He was not in the lineup. The Dodgers would have to try to win without him. For a moment, it looked possible. In the first inning, Mickey Hatcher hit a surprising 2-run home run for Los Angeles. Hatcher was not known as a power hitter, which made the moment even more unexpected. Dodger Stadium erupted. The underdogs had struck first, but Oakland answered. In the second inning, Jose Canseco came to the plate with the bases loaded. Canseco was exactly the kind of hitter the Dodgers feared. One swing could change everything. And it did. Canseco crushed a grand slam, sending the ball deep and giving Oakland a 4-2 lead. The Athletics had taken control. The Dodgers had started with energy, but now the stronger team had landed the bigger punch. For most of the night, that lead held. The Dodgers cut the score to 4-3 later in the game, but they could not get all the way back. In the 9th inning, Oakland turned to Dennis Eckersley. That was supposed to be the end. Eckersley was not an ordinary closer. In 1988, he was precise, fearless, and almost untouchable. He did not walk many hitters. He attacked the strike zone. He had a sharp slider and complete confidence. When Oakland gave him the ball with a late lead, the game usually belonged to him. The Dodgers were running out of time. The bottom of the 9th began with Los Angeles still trailing by 1 run. Eckersley retired the first 2 hitters. The Athletics were now 1 out away from winning Game 1. Then Mike Davis came to the plate. Davis had struggled during the season, but he managed to work a walk. That mattered because it put the tying run on base. Still, the Dodgers were down to their final out, and the next spot in the order was coming up. Tommy Lasorda had a decision to make. He looked down the bench, and there was Kirk Gibson. Gibson had spent much of the game away from the dugout, getting treatment and watching from inside. He later said hearing that the cameras could not find him helped push him toward action. He told the Dodgers he could hit if they needed him. Now they needed him. Gibson grabbed a bat. The crowd reacted as he appeared. This was not a normal pinch hitter walking to the plate. This was the National League MVP dragging his injured body into the most important at-bat of the season. He was not healthy enough to start. He could barely run. If he hit the ball on the ground, he would almost certainly be out. If he reached base, the Dodgers would have to deal with the fact that their base runner could hardly move. But with one swing, none of that would matter. That was the only chance. Gibson stepped into the batter's box. Dennis Eckersley looked in. The count began. At first, Gibson looked overmatched. He swung awkwardly. His body did not respond the way a healthy hitter's body should. His legs were the foundation for his swing, and both were hurting. Every pitch made the moment feel more unlikely. But Gibson kept battling. He fouled off pitches. He stayed alive. He tried to read Eckersley's pattern. He knew Eckersley liked to throw a backdoor slider to left-handed hitters. The pitch could start outside, then break back over the plate. It was the kind of pitch that made Eckersley great. The count reached 3-2. Full count, 2 outs. Bottom of the ninth, Dodgers trailing by 1. Mike Davis on first base, then Davis stole second. That changed everything. Now a single could tie the game, but Gibson was not exactly built for a clean single and a sprint down the line. The pressure was still enormous. Eckersley needed 1 strike to end it. Gibson needed 1 mistake to change it. Eckersley delivered. The pitch came in. Gibson swung. The ball lifted into right field. For a second everyone watched. Then the stadium understood. It was gone. Kirk Gibson had hit a 2-run walk-off home run. Dodgers 5, Athletics 4. Game over. Gibson began his slow, painful trip around the bases. It was not a normal home run trot. He could not run freely. He limped around the bases, pumping his arms as the crowd exploded around him. The Dodgers poured out of the dugout. Tommy Lasorda celebrated wildly. Dodger Stadium shook with disbelief. It looked like something written for a movie. The injured hero who was not supposed to play, the unbeatable closer, the final out, the full count, the swing, the limp around the bases, the fist pump. Everything about it felt too perfect to be real, but it happened. And what made it even more unbelievable was that it was Gibson's only at-bat of the entire World Series. He would not play again in the series. His body would not allow it. That 1 swing was all he had left. He used it to win Game 1. The home run did not technically win the World Series by itself. The Dodgers still had to win 3 more games. They still needed pitching, defense, and more big moments. But emotionally, the series changed right there. The Athletics had been 1 out away from taking control. Instead, they had watched an injured man hit one of the most shocking home runs in baseball history against their best reliever. That kind of loss can shake a team. The Dodgers went on to win the World Series in 5 games. Oral Hershiser dominated. The Dodgers kept finding ways to win. Oakland never fully recovered from the feeling of that first night. The heavily favored Athletics, the team many expected to overpower Los Angeles, lost the series to a team that seemed to turn belief into a weapon. Gibson's home run became the symbol of it all. Not because it was the longest home run, not because it came from the best swing, not because he played the whole series, but because of the story around it. A player who could barely walk hit one of the most important home runs ever. Baseball has always loved moments like this because the sport is built for suspense. There is no clock to run out. The defense has to get the final out. Until that happens, the game is still alive. A team can be 1 pitch away from victory and still lose everything. That is what happened to Oakland. The Athletics were 1 strike from winning Game 1. Instead, they became part of Kirk Gibson's legend. Dennis Eckersley remained a great pitcher. His career did not end because of that pitch. He would go on to have more success and eventually enter the Hall of Fame. But that home run followed him too. Great players are often remembered not only for their triumphs, but for the moments when they stood closest to history and ended up on the wrong side of it. Eckersley threw the pitch. Gibson hit it. Baseball never forgot. Vin Scully's call also became part of the moment. Scully understood when to speak and when to let the pictures carry the emotion. After the ball left the park and Gibson circled the bases, the broadcast gave the moment room to breathe. That silence helped make it feel even bigger. It was not just noise, it was awe. The image of Gibson pumping his arm as he limped around second base became one of baseball's most replayed clips. Even people who were not alive in 1988 have seen it. It shows up in documentaries, World Series montages, Dodgers history videos, and lists of the greatest sports moments ever. That is how you know a moment has crossed from highlight into legend. It no longer belongs only to the fans who watched it live. It becomes part of the sport's memory. For the Dodgers, the home run represented everything about their 1988 team. They were not the most talented team on paper. They were not the team with the biggest stars. They were not supposed to beat the Mets. They were not supposed to beat the Athletics. And in Game 1, with their MVP too hurt to start, they were not supposed to win that night either. But they did. That is why the swing still matters. It was not just a home run. It was the entire 1988 Dodgers season in one moment. Injured, doubted, almost beaten, still fighting, still dangerous, still alive. Kirk Gibson's career had other important moments. He won a World Series with the Detroit Tigers in 1984. He was an MVP. He was a respected, intense competitor. But the 1988 home run became the defining image of his life in baseball. Some athletes spend years building a legacy, and then one moment captures all of it. For Gibson, that moment came on one swing he almost never got to take. Think about how many things had to happen for the home run to exist. The Dodgers had to be trailing by exactly one run. There had to be 2 outs. Mike Davis had to reach base. Gibson had to be available enough to hit, but injured enough to make the moment feel impossible. Eckersley had to be on the mound. The count had to go full. Davis had to steal second. Eckersley had to throw the pitch Gibson was looking for, and Gibson, with both legs hurting, had to put one perfect swing on the ball. Change any of those details, and the moment disappears. That is why sports can feel so powerful. History often depends on tiny openings. A pitch an inch different, a swing a fraction late, a ball caught at the wall, a manager choosing another hitter, a player deciding he is too hurt to try. But Gibson tried, and because he tried, the game became immortal. The home run is also famous because it connects pain and glory in a way people instantly understand. You do not have to know advanced baseball strategy to understand the image. An injured player can barely walk. His team is losing. The best pitcher on the other team is trying to finish the game. The injured player swings once and wins it. That is simple. That is dramatic. That is why it still works as a story. There is also something unforgettable about the setting. Dodger Stadium at night, the white uniforms, the roar from the crowd. Gibson's awkward movement, the ball sailing into right field, Lasorda jumping in celebration, the Athletics stunned, the Dodgers suddenly believing the impossible was not impossible anymore. Moments like that do not need explanation after they happen. Everyone watching knows. In the years after 1988, Gibson's home run became a measuring stick. Whenever a player hits a dramatic World Series walk-off, people compare it to Gibson. Whenever an injured star steps into a huge moment, people think of Gibson. In 2024, when Freddie Freeman hit a walk-off grand slam for the Dodgers in Game 1 of the World Series while dealing with an ankle injury, comparisons to Gibson appeared immediately. That shows how powerful the 1988 moment remains. More than 3 decades later, it is still the reference point. That is what legends do. They become the thing other moments are compared to. Gibson's swing also proved something about October baseball. The postseason does not always belong to the healthiest team, the richest team, or the team that looks best on paper. Sometimes it belongs to the team that survives the pressure. Sometimes it belongs to the player who should not even be standing there. The Dodgers won the 1988 World Series because they played like a team that did not care what the predictions said. Gibson's home run gave that belief a face. It told everyone watching that Los Angeles was not going to be easy to kill. For Oakland, it was the opposite. The Athletics were still talented. They still had chances. But Game 1 had slipped away in the most painful way possible. Losing a close game is hard. Losing after being 1 out away is worse. Losing because an injured MVP came off the bench and homered against your best reliever is the kind of defeat that stays in a clubhouse. The Dodgers took that energy. The Athletics had to carry the shock. That is why some people say the World Series changed in Game 1. Not because the series was mathematically over, but because the emotional balance shifted. The underdog had landed the unforgettable punch, and the favorite had to wonder what had just happened. The beauty of Gibson's home run is that it was both unbelievable and completely real. It was not a myth created after the fact. The footage exists. You can watch him limp. You can see the swing. You can see the ball leave the park. You can hear the crowd. You can watch him pump his fist as he goes around the bases. It is all there. Unlike Wilt Chamberlain's 100-point game, which lives partly in missing footage and imagination, Gibson's moment was captured perfectly. The cameras were rolling. The whole country watching the World Series could see it happen. That helped it become one of the defining sports images of the 1980s. But footage alone does not make a moment great. The story has to be there. And Gibson's story had everything. The underdog team, the injured star, the dominant opponent, the final out, the famous closer, the full count, the impossible swing, the celebration, the championship that followed. That is why the home run still feels alive. It was not just a highlight inside a series. It was a turning point, a symbol, and a perfect piece of baseball drama. Kirk Gibson never needed to play another inning in that World Series to define it. His body had almost nothing left, but baseball gave him one at-bat, one chance to do something that should not have been possible. He did not waste it. The Dodgers went on to finish the series in Oakland. They won Game 5 by a score of 5-2, completing one of the most surprising World Series victories of the decade. Hershiser was named World Series MVP. Lazorda had another championship. The Dodgers had beaten the team almost everyone thought was better. But when people remember the 1988 World Series, they usually start with Game 1. They start with the limp. They start with the swing. They start with Gibson. That is not an accident. Some moments explain an entire story better than a final box score ever could. The 1988 Dodgers were not supposed to win. Kirk Gibson was not supposed to play. Dennis Eckersley was not supposed to give up the home run. The Athletics were not supposed to lose that game. But sports history is filled with moments where supposed to does not matter. The ball still has to be thrown. The bat still has to meet it. The game still has to end. And on October 15th, 1988, the game ended with Kirk Gibson limping around the bases while Dodger Stadium lost its mind. That is why the title fits. The injured player who could barely walk. Because that is what makes the moment unforgettable. If Gibson had been healthy, it still would have been a dramatic home run. A walk-off in Game 1 of the World Series is always important, but the injuries turned it into something else. They made every step part of the story. They made the home run feel less like strength and more like willpower. He did not sprint around the bases, he survived them. And somehow, that made the celebration even better. The fist pumps were not smooth. The trot was not graceful. The body language was not polished. It was raw, painful, and real. It looked like a man forcing himself through the greatest moment of his career because the pain could wait until after he touched home plate. That is the image that lasted, not just the ball going over the fence, the injured man refusing to disappear. For baseball fans, Kirk Gibson's home run remains one of the closest things the sport has to a perfect ending. It happened at night in the World Series with 2 outs against a Hall of Fame closer for an underdog team by a player whose body was almost broken. Hollywood could have written it, but if it were fiction, people might say it was too obvious, too dramatic, too perfect, too unbelievable. Real life got there first. On that October night in Los Angeles, Kirk Gibson stepped into the batter's box as a last resort. He was not there because he was healthy. He was there because the Dodgers had nowhere else to turn. One swing later, he was part of baseball forever. The Athletics would win games in other seasons. Dennis Eckersley would remain one of the greatest closers ever. The Dodgers would have other heroes and other championships. But that moment stayed separate from everything else. It became the kind of sports memory that never needs much introduction. Kirk Gibson, the limp, the home run. Everyone knows what it means. And for anyone who does not, the story is simple. A team that was supposed to lose reached the World Series. Their best hitter was too injured to start. They trailed by 1 run with 2 outs in the 9th. The other team had one of the best closers in baseball on the mound. Then the injured player came off the bench, fought through 1 at-bat, and hit a home run that changed everything. That is why people still talk about it. That is why the clip still gives fans chills. That is why the 1988 World Series cannot be told without it. Because before the Dodgers won the championship, before the Athletics realized the series would not go the way they expected, before Game 5 ended it all, there was one swing in Game 1 that made the impossible feel real. Kirk Gibson could barely walk, but he could still swing. And when he did, baseball history flew into the right field seats.